What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. We're here, baby. We got the big cutdowns tomorrow. We have the NFL about 10 days away from kicking off. We got college football games Thursday. Real football. No more fake football. No more preseason. Just 53-man rosters, real games, real schemes, real stakes. So we got to start talk about, and I did a reaction video yesterday to CeeDee Lamb, and I'll piggyback that off that today in terms of a theory I have when it comes to his money. Obviously, we got to talk about the Cowboys and Trey Lance, who had one of the worst games you'll ever see preseason or regular season. Some things I saw with the Broncos. Obviously, Bo Nix has been named the quarterback for week 1. And something I heard with their backups that just is something now I truly believe, and it just hit home even more. Belichick, who I thought I watched his 30 minutes with McAfee a little earlier today, was as good as he's been ever. I mean, he's kind of hitting his stride. And he said something in that. He said 2 things. I want to play a little audio of something he said regarding a general manager that, put some pieces of the puzzle together. And then something he thought about when it comes to the kickoff rule. And then just some overall thoughts on the cutdowns. I've been the Turk, the guy picking up their playbooks, picking up their stuff, telling them to come up to the GM's office or to go see the trainer. And it's a tough time, but where you start does not determine where you finish. So kind of want to go over that. And then just a couple other things on this Take Tuesday. I think I've been thinking a lot about the AFC North, and I want to discuss that a little bit. But before we dive into football, do you want to go to one of these games? College football is here. The NFL is here. Do you want to go and enjoy yourself on a Saturday or a Sunday? Have a good time, have some beers, tailgate, take a buddy, take a family member, and just have a good time while saving a little money. Well, my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime, been using them for a long time, and I will continue to use them. They have you covered because anytime you can save money, anytime that the app doesn't get any easier to use, from flash deals to picking where you're sitting to picking the venue, I cannot recommend them enough. So if you want to go to anything, concerts, comedy shows, obviously sporting events, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, I think we're in the middle of a market explosion when it comes to wide receivers. And we see this in a lot of different industries. When something just takes off and it feels like it will never stop. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be, because sometimes when there's a boom, there also comes a bust and a disaster. And we saw that with the running backs. For a long period of time in my life, running backs were a focal position or focal point for teams to build their team around. And up until within the last decade, really, but even 6-7 years, they were always a highly paid guy. They were someone that you relied on. I was just watching the Steve McNair doc, RIP. And I was telling Maria, like, I don't think you realize how good Eddie George was. You could just ride this guy like a freaking thoroughbred, and he was. I mean, he was a massive, great player. And there were guys like him all around the league, and they got paid premiums. And then after the Gurley deal, after the Zeke deal, let's face it, last year all these guys were bitching and moaning because no one wanted to get paid because the market had changed. And the market right now on these wide receivers is outrageous. In a good way, if you're them, if you are these teams, you're definitely a little uncomfortable because we've never seen teams allocate so much to a position not named offensive tackle or defensive end, and obviously the quarterback, and sustain winning. Now, I said this yesterday when the news broke that all these guys getting paid have proven to be winning players. So it's not like these guys are playing on crappy teams and then get paid. Like St. Brown now has been a stalwart for a team that we all think is going to be awesome again. They won a bunch last year. They were trending in the right direction. 2 years, like he's a winning player. Jamar Chase, proven winning player. CeeDee Lamb, their best wide receiver. They're rattling off 12 wins a season. But I think the Chiefs kind of proved when they flipped their guys, same with the Packers, and just kept on having success. It does make you think, and it does make you wonder. And I think we're in the middle of a case study, if this works or it does not. And I don't know the answer. I don't blame any of these teams for signing their guys. I think it's so easy to pull the Chiefs move or pull the Packers move. It can easily blow up in your face. The whole point of drafting is to land Jamar Chase at 5th overall, or land CeeDee Lamb in the top 20, or land Brandon Ayuk at the end of the first round. Now, Ayuk is in a different category than Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. He's not as good of a player as those guys, but that's the point of a draft pick, is to land a star player. Then, when it comes to paying them, you have to decide, what am I going to allocate? And a lot of talk has been Jerry Jones. Why does he wait so long? I have a simple theory. I looked it up, getting ready for this podcast. Justin Jefferson signed his historic contract on June 3rd. So we are almost 3 months removed, all of June, all of July, and almost all of August before Jerry Jones pulls the trigger and gives a contract to CeeDee Lamb that the moment that contract was signed, now it might not have been the exact numbers, but you were going to be in the ballpark about 95, 98% when it came to paying CeeDee Lamb. Well, if you're Jerry Jones and you look at the preseason, you go, we're not going to play any of our guys. This entire preseason was basically a tryout for Trey Lance. And you feel good about the guy because part of when you sign one of these massive contracts, right? And we've seen it with other positions, Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack, Jefferson, St. Brown, Penei Sewell. Like we've seen a lot of young guys get broken off. You believe that guy on and off the field is worth it. You trust his work ethic. One, you've seen it because he's been your guy. The character, the wiring is all there. You feel good about him being in shape. Now, there's a difference between training and being ready for an actual football game, but you still got 2+ weeks to get ready. Is you go, well, we already know the numbers. The stock market has been ripping this year. All my money's invested, I'm sure, if I'm Jerry, or a large chunk of it, that pays these contracts. It's not like you just sit it in a savings account that yields you 0.01%. Even if you had put it in a money market fund, a couple $100 million, giving you 5%. And we know Jerry, little bit of a wheeler and dealer. He's got some big cojones on him. I would imagine he's been a little more aggressive. So he goes, listen, we're going to pay this contract anyway. We're going to have to give him a $35, $40 million signing bonus. I have this money paying me 10, 15% a month, potentially right now, depending on where he's invested. So as long as we get this guy under contract before we cut down our roster, why don't we just let the money ride and basically have this contract kind of accumulate money that's going to essentially pay him of money that we already have? So my theory was that Jerry was making so much money in some of his accounts, he just let this keep ripping. And he had a date of really today, yesterday, kind of this kind of timeline, really before Tuesday, the cut down, that we'll offer him the contract that we know he's going to sign. But we could have done this, like this number in this contract. Jerry knew this 3 weeks ago. Why wouldn't he just sign it? Because he was making money off his money. Basic economics. That's my theory on the whole thing, especially with the archaic way of having to fund these deals in escrow. So you got to lose the cash anyway. You might as well keep it if it's doing well. And at the end of the day, like to me, the only news was the amount of money they paid him. There was never any question about this guy getting traded. No one thought he wasn't going to be a Cowboy. And now the pressure, like there's always pressure on the Dallas Cowboys. They're the biggest brand in the NFL. Their quarterback and their coach are under 1-year contracts. And it's going to be a fascinating watch because honestly, week 1, I like them. I like the Cowboys more than most. Everyone thinks that they're going to come back to earth, be under 500. I do not. I think they're a playoff team. And they had a big blow that the news came out over the last 24 hours that Bland, their star DB, kind of do it all, just makes a bunch of plays. Fresno State Bulldog before Sac State. So California guy. It hurts. He's going to be out for a couple months, but they still got a lot of good players. They got a lot of good young offensive linemen, and you get CeeDee ready to roll. I'm more bullish on the Cowboys than most. We had the appetizer last week. Now it's time to feast. College football is back. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a full slate of games for week 1, including the big matchup in Atlanta between the preseason number 1 and number 16. It's going to be the DraftKings biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride, now all the way through the extended playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into the college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers, bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Now, part of being a wheeler and dealer is trying to find value. And Jerry did that when he traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance. And we've talked a lot about this. The reason Trey Lance went for way more than Mac Jones, who's a much better player. I mean, Mac Jones, listen, I don't like him as a starting quarterback. He's a good backup quarterback. Justin Fields, as of recording this, probably should be the starter in Pittsburgh. And Zach Wilson, who all those guys were traded for 6th and 7th round picks. I think Zach Wilson's going to win the number 2 job. Those guys were traded this offseason. You get them for 1 year. Jerry got Trey Lance for 2. Now, it was a lot of money. It was like $9 million, and you took the contract from the 49ers, which was, I mean, looking back, that was a fleecing, and people are like, well, they traded 3 first-round picks. Yeah, that's water under the bridge. That's spilled milk. That happened. Once you have an established bad asset that no one was offering nearly that much, it was a bad trade. Is it the end-all, be-all? Of course not. It's not that big a deal. But once you trade for a guy that's making $5+ million, that I got news for you. If you look at the league and go, let's assume every team has 3 quarterbacks. Not every team will keep 3 on their 53, but every team will have 3 in some form or fashion. The team that have 2 will have a guy on the practice squad. Many teams will have 3 guys on their active roster. So that's 96 quarterbacks. I'm not sure that Trey Lance would crack the top 90. I'm not saying he's the 96th guy, but he's definitely not the 80th. He's not, is he a starting quarterback? He's not a backup quarterback. The game that he had against the Chargers, who were playing people full of that are going to be on the waiver wire come Tuesday, his interceptions, listen, people throw picks. It happens. He threw 5 picks, and honestly, 4 of them were just like, that's embarrassing. The one that ended the game, pretty easy throw. Just layer the thing over the linebacker ahead of the safety. Should have been an easy touchdown. They would have tied the game. He threw one in the end zone. He threw a bad pick on an out route that he was waylaid on that he didn't see the guy. He threw a pick 6 where he basically threw it right to the line. He's hitting these defenders in stride. He has no touch, and he's a turnover machine. I think there's a chance he's the worst draft pick in the history of the league. Now, we have seen guys like Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf, like guys, quote unquote, bust that were high picks. But those guys were just that team's draft pick. When you factor in the trade compensation for the players, the Niners gave up their 12th pick and then 2 other ones. And then the Cowboys gave up a 4th-round pick. So basically, 3 first-round picks, a 4th-round pick for this player. You can't say that about all these other guys who were just horrendous, right? They were just, we had the number 2 overall pick, or you picked the player because we were terrible last year, right? Like if Drake May fails, let's just say he's awful, or Jaden Daniels or whatever, those teams just had the pick because the previous year they sucked. And then they get their first-round picks the following years. Like they didn't give up anything to get the guy. This player, and listen, it's not his fault. It's on the teams. But there are no more excuses. He went from Kyle Shanahan, who's one of the best offensive coaches, to Mike McCarthy, who's also a fantastic offensive coach, who's coached, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott to unreal seasons over the last 15 years. This guy just can't play. And listen, sometimes, and I've been saying this for a while, it's you kick yourself when you get a player and you go, God, he's got some talent, but he just immature, bad guy, doesn't care, doesn't have the wiring. I think the hard part about this one is this guy's a good guy. He tries. Like this is not from a lack of effort. It's just from a lack of skills. And like I said, worst draft pick of all time. I think when you factor in the trade compensation, I don't even know if it'd be an argument when it comes to quarterbacks. He cannot win a backup job 4 years into his career. Honestly, in Dallas, it ain't even close. San Francisco last year, he was not even going to win their third job because Brock Purdy was their starter. Sam Darnold was their backup. If Kyle Shanahan had to pick one, he would have gone with Kyle Allen over Trey Lance. Trey Lance is now in the Mitch Trubisky category that if you put him on the field, you're going to lose. You cannot play with a guy. It's impossible. Now, for some weird reason, the Bills want Mitch Trubisky to be their backup. Awful decision. To me, if I'm the Cowboys, because I'm paying him either way, I would cut the player and just move him on the practice squad to save a roster spot. Now, Jerry keeps saying he's a lock, he's a lock, he's a lock. Like you watched that preseason game, which I watched it. It was tough. It really was, because the decision-making, the lack of touch, the lack of just seeing anything. This is not playing the Baltimore Ravens defense week 7 last year. This is playing the Chargers 4-string players. When you're trying to just earn a spot in the league. So just listen, he's just not very good. And thank God the Cowboys honestly didn't trade more. But he's the worst of the group, but by a long, long stretch. And speaking of the other guys, my theory on my backup quarterback, like look at the Cowboys. Cooper Rush does not think he's the starter, does not go around saying, I'm a starter in this league. You go around the NFL, good teams, their backup quarterback knows their role. Doesn't mean they don't have self-confidence. Doesn't mean that they don't think if they're given the opportunity, they could show everyone wrong. But they know when they walk into the building, starting whenever OTAs start till the end of the season, they have a specific role, essentially be an extra coach, help the starting quarterback in every way possible. When I get a back, and that's the hard part about, we'll see. Justin Fields might end up being the starter, but Justin Fields thinks he's a starter. Like whenever you have your backup, again, it might turn out not to be, but even if it's Russell Wilson thinks he's a starter. Like that's all messed up. Whoever's behind Lamar Jackson, who's ever behind Joe Burrow, who's ever behind Matt Stafford, who's ever behind Josh Allen, they know for a fact. And I wanted to play something because Zach Wilson, who has looked really good in the preseason and was really bad, obviously, with New York, like couldn't have been any worse. But then he goes to a real offensive coach in Sean Payton. And I'm not saying this guy's a starter, but maybe there's something there. And maybe this guy can just go on to have a long career as a backup. But one of the knocks on Zach Wilson has always been maturity. Like, does he get it? And then I watched him have a fantastic preseason and then listen to the way he talked about just being on the team with Bo Nix as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I was excited for him. I mean, I don't think it was a surprise too much, obviously, right? I think he's had a great camp. I told him I'm excited for him for this opportunity. I really believe that they're putting him in a good situation. I think Sean has done a phenomenal job, and then the guys that we get to hang out with, starting with Davis and then Joe and Pete and then Johnny Moe, we have a great offensive staff. I think they do a great job. And then Bo has just continued to keep getting better, so I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he's ready for it.
Then I listened to Jared Stidham, who's 28 years old. Not a young player, been in the league a long time, has made 4 career starts. So this is not a Zach Wilson situation where he got a bunch of starts early, it didn't go well, kind of derailed. Like, he's never been a starter. No one's ever viewed him as a starter. Why? Because he's not a starting quarterback. Hell, the Broncos did him a pretty good solid for giving him a 2-year, $10 million contract last year as a backup quarterback. And he got to start a couple games at the end, just like a couple years ago when Derek Carr got bench / eventually traded. He got to start a couple games there, but he's a backup. And there's nothing wrong with that. You could argue it's one of the best jobs in the world, right? Because, yeah, you make a lot of money as a starting quarterback, but take a bunch of criticism. You got to play. You got to execute. Everyone's watching you. It's hard. Like, you can get injured. As a backup quarterback, if you're making $5, $6, $7 million, in a perfect world, you never take a real snap. You don't take any reps at practice beside the scout team where they can't hit you. You're really just a vibes guy, right? How many jobs in America, right? These guys making $40, $50 million playing professional sports, or maybe some of these artists They have to perform. If they do not perform, it will not work out. As a backup quarterback, you don't need to perform at all unless you're thrust into action that they don't want you thrust into. I just need you to provide support. How many people make $5 million to just provide support? It's unheard of. It's an incredible gig. Yet Jared Stidham, after the game, and listen, he also, this isn't the only thing he said, but he said he's going to be there to support. But he said something that I went, I'd think about trading him if I was Sean Payton. I wouldn't want this with this type of ad. I don't want my backup quarterback. Let's listen to Stidham really quick on his view of himself not winning the starting quarterback job in Denver.
I mean, first of all, obviously I was very disappointed. I know I'm a starting quarterback in this league. I have zero doubts about that. And, it just didn't shake out my way. But I know what kind of player I am, kind of person I am. And like I said earlier, I'll be ready to go if I need to be. And, like I said, I have no doubts that I'm a starting caliber quarterback in this league.
I'm sorry. I couldn't, if I owned the team, if I was a GM or if I was the coach, couldn't have my guy with that attitude. I mean, there's these chances he's a third quarterback. And he believes he's a starting quarterback. And there's something to be said about, like I said, having belief internally in yourself. But you got to know your role. The moment you don't know your role, it's impossible to function in that role. And I wonder if this offseason he thought, this is my time to shine. Well, I get the moment OTA start, but then once the draft happens and the guy's drafted in the top 15, it's over, buddy. Sayonara. They drafted this guy for a reason. And he's clearly a more talented player. But I can't quite understand having that mentality when you've started 4 career games. You're 28 years old. You've never been a starter. And the only time you started is because the starter, because of financial reasons, got benched. So you have to wonder, Sean Payton goes with Zach Wilson as the backup. Does Jared Stidham get shipped somewhere else? Belichick's performance today on Pat McAfee for 30-plus minutes was awesome. Belichick is really starting to come into his own. He ripped some players. He's like, yeah, that contract Atlanta gave to the corner. He's like, he doesn't have a pick in 2 years. What the hell are they doing? Maybe he's taking some personal shots because he didn't get the job, but it was good. I highly recommend watching it. But Bill said something. I was just watching it, and he mentioned something. I was like, damn. Because I had heard, obviously, when the Eagles season ended, a lot of people thought Sirianni was going to get fired. And then Bill was available. And I had thought, Bill, Howie, how would that work? And then I remember early on in the offseason before the Super Bowl, just kind of doing some digging. And a lot of people hit me with I think Bill and Howie have a pretty good relationship. I think Bill respects Howie a lot. And then I listened to Bill's take on the trade Howie made with the commies. And I went, yeah, I think what I'm hearing is real. Let's take a listen to Bill on Howie.
But I thought it was a really interesting trade that Philadelphia and Washington had. I mean, to me, it was another great trade by Howard Roseman. I mean, I don't know how he keeps, getting number 1 picks for Carson Wentz and gets Dotson for basically a 4th from the team in his division. But it's a great trade. Howie, the Eagles don't have much money on their salary cap, but they get a rookie contract. They get a good player. I get it that he's not a starter, but he'll be their 3rd receiver. He gives them a lot of depth, and he'll be, nobody's going to double Dotson there, right? I mean, he'll be the 3rd guy, with Brown and Smith and maybe even Goddard. So I think it's a great move for Philadelphia. They really strengthen their team. They really didn't have to give up anything. There isn't give up any salary cap money, as little as possible, and they gave up, really not much in the draft. I mean, if you think about Philadelphia's 5th, which will, probably, or Philadelphia's 3rd, which will probably be close to a 4th, and Washington's 5th, which is probably going to be close to a 4th, let's just say, in the ballpark. You're really looking at not too big of a trade there. You throw in the 7s, but, I mean, it really isn't a big trade, I think it was a great trade by Philadelphia and by Howie. I don't know how he keeps pulling those off, but I think you have great value on this.
Obviously, Sirianni under a lot of pressure this year. Many people think he will not survive. Time will tell. But if you're Bill Belichick and you're going to come back, it's pretty clear it's impossible to be the GM and the head coach again. You need help, right? You need someone to support you. Andy Reid did that when he went to Kansas City, and who's one of Bill's best friends in the league? Andy Reid. When did Andy Reid shoot like a rocket ship? When he's like, you know what? I'm just going to coach the team. I need someone I can trust. And he had John Dorsey, who's known forever, and then Brett Veach, who's also known forever. Very comfortable. You need someone who's good at that job. Well, what's Bill a big believer in? Value. You see CeeDee Lamb sign this contract. Bill never did shit like that. Wait last minute, pay premiums. Like, he hated that crap. So a lot of people, Dallas, Bill Belichick, don't see it. Because one, even if he doesn't want to be the GM and he doesn't have a choice with Jerry, he doesn't like doing business like that. The other team that I've thought is like, well, he's worked for the Giants right back in the day, maybe as a soft spot for that. They have no situation with their GM. That guy's completely over his head. Well, you got Howie Roseman, who is an excellent drafter and who's excellent with value, who can handle all that. And they have a team with a lot of talent. So if that job does become available, because the other thing I'd heard, and this is kind of well documented, like they were very serious about Bill if they had moved on from Sirianni. And I wonder when you listen to those words, like Bill respects this guy. Bill ain't just getting on his knees and, circle jerking everybody. That's not really his style. And if you listen to that, his 30 minutes with McAfee, really only a couple guys he gave a lot of credit to. Chiefs, Eagles trade. I mean, he's not exactly throwing around compliments. So this is something to keep an eye on. Now, you know where I've stood. I thought Kellen Moore is a real player, and I do believe that. But I also think Belichick's a real player. And I think that would be difficult if the opportunity does present itself, how serious the Eagles got there. Because I think the relationship with Howie just running all the deals and Bill just focusing on coaching the team and working hand in hand with him is pretty viable. The other thing that he said that I had never thought about or heard, now I'm not some special teams guru and texting people about it because I really don't care. Bill Belichick equated the new kickoff rule to golf. He believes you should have done the same kickoff, but just move it back. Well, in golf, up until the last 15, 20 years, long hitters hit it 270 yards. A lot of guys on the PGA Tour in the 80s and 70s, because of the equipment, were hitting drives 250 yards. So a par four that was 400 yards, if you hit it 250, you got another 150 yards in. But if a par 450 yards, Rory McIlroy's playing it, or Bryson DeChambeau or Scotty Scheffler, they have a flip wedge in. It's a different sport. So what they have done to challenge players in the sport of golf is they've elongated the course. They've pushed the tees back to make, instead of 410-yard par fours, 490-yard par fours or 500-yard par fours, where just a little more challenging given the equipment and given how far these guys are hitting it. And Bill essentially thinks this kickoff rule is stupid because everyone did it in the preseason. Why? There were no stakes. And he thought that a lot of coaches just went to the other coach like, no matter what, don't kick it out of the end zone. Let's both practice this. And everyone was on board. But in the regular season games, every single person will just kick it through the end zone because it's not worth, and we've seen a couple. There was one in the Niner game. There was one, I forget the other game that had happened. But I initially thought that like go up the middle, there would be a lot of action. The action's on the edges. And if you can get a close-off block, you can get to the 50 pretty quickly. And if that happens once a game, it is not worth it. So are a lot of these teams just going to kick it out of the end zone and just basically wave the white flag to the 30-yard line? Because that's what Bill Belichick thought they were going to do. He wished, and I agree with this, push the ball back. Instead of kicking it off at the 35, push it back 15 yards. So it's basically impossible to kick it out of the end zone. And at best, your guy's going to get it to like the goal line and have the old school returns. Now, the pushback from Roger in the league is we're trying to take out the collisions in this. And like, we don't want the concussions in that play, and we want more action. But if everyone's just kicking out of the end zone with the new kickoff rule, are we not going to get any action? Because I know this, the 49ers, who are, for being a good team, their special teams is historically just bad. They drafted a kicker last year in the 4th round from Michigan with a big leg. I'll promise you Kyle Shanahan's going to say, kick it. If their defense is good, kick it out of the end zone every play. And I think a lot of other teams are going to fall under that quickly. Because I said forever, like the new kickoff rule, I was like, this is going to be sweet. Well, why wouldn't you just put, if it's a tie game, Tyreek Hill back there or Deebo Samuel back there or whoever back there who's really good and explosive? And Bill's like, yeah, the moment they do that, the last thing you would ever do is kick it to that guy. So I do wonder if this kickoff rule, which was kind of exciting, I enjoyed watching it in the preseason because everyone was actually just trying to follow the rules and kick it in the little box. If that stops happening, we're going to get the same result as previous years. It's going to look different the moment they kick it off. But at the end of the day, it's just going to start 5 yards more forward. Or I guess 4 if it used to start at the 20 if you kicked it out of the end zone. The cutdowns. Like most people, when they first get hired in the NFL, the one of your roles during training camp is to be the Turk, which I just call it that because that's what they called it in Hard Knocks back in 2000. And basically, the majority of GMs in the NFL have done this role. The majority of scouts at one point in time in their career have done this role. And it sucks, right? Now, it's a lot different than when I was in the league because there were 2 separate cutdowns. It was only 80 instead of 90. And then you went from like 80 to 70 and 70 from 53. Now you essentially just go from 90 to 53. And that's a lot of guys. So some players have a pretty good idea. I got no shot, but it's a difficult moment for a lot of people. Now, the good part is like for all of us, life is not about where you start. Where you start and going through rough times. I've been fired a couple times. I'm sure many people listening to this have been let go from a job, have been part of a company that went belly up. Maybe you started a company that went bankrupt. You got 2 options. You either sulk about it or you realize the sun comes up the next day and you keep swinging and you learn from those situations. So a lot of guys that were drafted over the last couple of years will be cut on Tuesday. They will be added to the practice squad. And the best part about the practice squad is, one, it's eligible to basically everybody now. And there are 16 spots. Well, the season has never been longer. They added a game, and we know they're going to add another game. Is that you are one step away from being active on game day, even if you're on the practice squad. But when you get cut, like when you get fired or when you go belly up or when you go bankrupt, you get to realize, like, what did I do wrong? What do I need to improve at? How do I get better? Because that team goes, listen, you're not going to make the 53. We want you on the practice squad. You need to do A, B, and C to help our team. And we need you to get better at that. And if you show that, we have a lot of belief in you. We've invested a draft pick for you. We think there's a spot for you with this team. It could be week 1. If you're the guard or a linebacker or whoever on the practice squad, that linebacker breaks his arm. That, corner pulls a hammy. All of a sudden he's out. Well, what happens? The backup becomes the starter. The practice squad guy gets elevated to the active roster. And boom, you're automatically playing on special teams. And you're a rolled ankle away in week 2 from being on the field on defense or offense. So I would say it used to be a lot more negative to be cut because when I was in the league, the practice squad restrictions were really, really harsh. And they were very punitive for young players who had already played. So if you had already played, you were like a 7th round pick on a bad team and you had got a bunch of action in the regular season, your practice squad eligibility was gone. The last couple of years, Jason Peters, like 41 years old, he's been on practice squad. So it's incredible. You have your practice squad eligibility does not run out. I'm sure there are some stipulations, but not many if Jason Peters can be on a practice squad. So the opportunity to go on a practice squad, if this team used a draft pick on you and invested in you, I would work my ever-loving ass off because the difference of it's a big financial difference. There's a big difference between making $160,000 and making $1 million. But you are so close. And you're still, in the fire. It's not like you're removed from it. It's not like, well, you're fired, you're done, you got no shot. So I think it'll be a big deal when you see the list of all these guys getting cut, but it does not determine. We see how many guys get cut in their first or second year and go on to have long careers, eventually get a big contract. Happens all the time in this league. A couple other NFL stories. I saw today Jeremy Fowler on ESPN kind of went viral in 49er land, said that Trent Williams will not end his holdout until they figure out his contract situation. Well, yeah, no shit. Isn't that why he's been holding out? Like, how is that news? Yeah, he's holding out for more money and he won't end the holdout until he gets more money. That's literally what's going on. That's what he's been doing. I love it when something like that's said. It's like, oh my God, he just said what's literally been happening for the last 30 plus days. Now, pressure on the Niners. Time to get this thing done. Time to get Trent Williams taken care of. Get him in camp. You got no choice because you need him, and he's got leverage. But yeah, he wasn't just going to show up because he didn't want to take part in some practices. He wants more money, and based on these other contracts, he deserves more money. I think the Patriots, man, are just. I said this a couple weeks ago when Drake May barely played in the first preseason game. You signed Jacoby Brissett, who's 31 years old, who's played in a lot of regular season games. Your team's not going to be any good. He does not need preseason reps. It made no sense to not give all the reps. I get playing Zappy a little bit, try to increase, maybe get his trade value, but playing obviously Drake May and Milton. Play your young guys. Let them get reps now, because ideally they're not going to have to play in the regular season game for a while you suck and Jacoby is your sacrificial lamb. Well, Sunday Night Football happened. I turned it on a little late, and Drake May was already in the game. Then they showed Jacoby Brissett, and he's injured. I just went, what are these idiots doing? I think the Patriots have no clue what's going on. Honestly, none. Someone could have said, like, listen, Jacoby Brissett was signed simply to be a placeholder for Drake May. He's going to get hurt more than likely in a regular season game because our O-line sucks. This is not some 24-year-old bridge. This is a guy who's over 30, who's played a lot of football. Let's just wait till the regular season to play him. And if our timing's a little off, who cares? For him to get hurt in a preseason game, and it might be nothing. We'll see as more information comes out. This feels like a team that just has no direction. And if he is injured and they got to throw Drake May out there, who got some talent, I like Drake May, he might get murdered because that offensive line is going to be the worst in the NFL. And luckily he can move, but that was not the plan. The plan was to sit him. And they executed that plan by paying $10 million to a bridge quarterback. Then to get him hurt in a meaningless game on Sunday Night Football is kind of an embarrassment, honestly. A lot of guys headed to PUP, right? If you're not healthy right now and you go to PUP, you got to minimum miss the first month of the season. So that can be a big blow. Some guys aren't as shocking as others. Like I saw Nick Chubb going to PUP. Well, yeah, his leg got snapped about 7 different directions. That he's going to be ready for week 1. Then there are the guys that maybe tore ACLs or whatever early in the season. Are you comfortable with where they're at? Because they got to take a 53-man spot. A lot of hard conversations right now are happening in all these buildings as they're kind of putting their roster together, even though they've known, but you kind of need to go ahead from your doctor. You got to talk to the player. And some of these guys go on PUP, might not want to go on PUP. They think they're a little closer, but maybe you feel more comfortable with the guy that's been out there during training camp. And then you give that guy basically an extra month to keep rehabbing and practicing to make the transition. But that's a huge conversation going on right now. Because if you put the guy there, you can't bring him in week 2. Like, it kind of is set for a while. The Ravens, Joe Diaz, they call him Joe D. Their offensive line coach passed away over the weekend. And he had been with the Ravens since 2017. He was 70 years old. Just in a vacuum, that's just awful. I mean, losing anyone's life at 70 in 2024, like, to me, 70 is kind of young. Had an acute illness, got diagnosed over the summer. Clearly, bad stuff happened quick, and he died. And I think that can be a huge, huge, powerful moment in a bad way. One, you can't replace your offensive line coach, right? That's irreplaceable. It's going into week 1. But this is a guy that's been there since 2017. So all these offensive linemen, the homegrown guys, all your offensive players from Lamar to Mark Andrews, think how much time they have spent around this human. I mean, you could tell John Harbaugh, who tried to keep it professional, was pretty rattled by this, and rightfully so. That one overall take I have, I think the AFC North is not going to be as good. And I think specifically looking at the Ravens, like you lose your defensive coordinator, you elevate a guy who's never called defensive plays, and then you have something like this happen, that this is a heavy thing that you carry with you. Like this is someone that your coaching staff, your team, your front office, football buildings are not that big. There are 15 to 20 coaches. There are 60 to 65 players, training staff, equipment staff. Like everyone knows each other intimately, knows your wives, knows where you live. Like you just spend so much time together. This is hard, man. And when I was with the Eagles, my last year, Andy's son passed away at the in training camp, and he was working with a strength coach. Everyone in the staff knew him. It's just hard. It's something that's hard for a team to shake. And I don't know, man. I think this got a chance to just not derail the Ravens season, but I already had them taking a step back. I think this is hard to overcome. And I'm just down on the AFC North in general. So, hot take, spicy take. I just don't think the AFC North is going to be very good. Obviously, they have really good players in the division, some of the best players in the league in the division. But the Ravens, we just talked about. The Browns, I'm sorry, when that's your quarterback situation, I'm out. The reason that they saved their season last year is Joe Flacco, who I was listening to a fantasy podcast. They're like, he had one of the great fantasy Decembers last year. The Steelers situation, I can't get behind it. The Bengals, Jamar Chase been holding out. Joe Burrow can't practice 4 straight days. So this was a division that we all viewed as the best division in football coming into the season. Last year, 3 teams made the playoffs. The Ravens were the 1 seed. The Browns were really good. I mean, they won 11 games with Flacco playing the majority of it. And the Steelers were just their typical 10 wins. It wouldn't shock me if only 1 team makes the playoffs out of this division. I guess you would have to lean with the Ravens, but I'm telling you, man, it just feels weird. This division feels weird. I don't even think that's really debatable at this point in time.